What is up, you beautiful people? I hope you're doing amazing today. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unqualified Wisdoms, where I, your fully unqualified host, talk to you about societal and cultural topics. In the last episode, I opened up about a couple of struggles I've had throughout my life with toxic masculinity. And I felt like it resounded with a lot of people I personally know, and I've had some great conversations relating from that episode. So I thought, why don't I tackle a couple of things I know people can struggle with, especially younger people in general. We tend to struggle with these types of things more often than not. And the struggles I'm referring to relate to self-esteem, confidence, and your own personal identity. Things that are especially volatile and evolving in our younger years. And I've personally struggled quite a bit with these types of issues throughout my life. And at some point in my life, I decided that those things were holding me back from achieving my full potential. So I wanted to tackle them head first and try to proactively do something to better myself. And one of the ways I most proactively engaged my own struggles was by talking to people I know that overcame these types of things in their own life, and they helped me personally deal with those situations by telling me how they approached them, how they went through the ropes of, tackling those issues, and then found a healthy and constructive way that they approached those situations and helped them out of their rut they were stuck in. And I've always felt like that was one of the most effective ways to tackle the issues I had, by going to other people that had more experience with these types of things and learning from them how they achieved reaching that zen and happiness. And oftentimes when we're talking about self-esteem, I feel like it's very much intrinsically linked for us younger people in how connected we are to each other through social media. I feel like social media has become a phenomenon that pretty much everybody is involved in social media. Practically everybody that we know has an Instagram, might have a Twitter. If you're a little older, you might even have a Facebook account, to remember birthdays and anniversaries and that type of stuff. But I feel like oftentimes, because so much of the content we consume and interact with is on social media, it's very much a route for these self-esteem and confidence issues a lot of people have. Now, I know for a fact that oftentimes I'll log into Instagram, go on, my Explorer feed, and I'll just see these, idealized, gorgeous versions of life that I don't have. Especially from influencers and celebrities that post their travels to Mykonos, to Bali, all these amazing trips that I don't have a chance to, partake in because we've got to work 9 to 5 or we got to study and we don't have the money to do those types of things. And at the same time, it's not solely the blame of celebrities. I know for a fact most of us post a very, editorial version of our lives when we post on social media. Most of us will not post on their daily, and if they post a lot, it's mostly a very curated way in which we want to show our lives to others. It's not going to be, the nitty-gritty. It's not going to be the ugly sides of your daily life. It's going to be the most beautiful interactions you have and the most amazing things you do. You'll post at parties, you'll post when you're with your friends, when you're having a nice meal, those types of situations. But most of the time, you will not post your mundane, everyday life. Even if you have a super interesting life, most of the time, you're not going to post those types of things on social media because we make a very editorial choice when we post on social media. It's very much a selective process by which we want to share the most ideal pictures, the most ideal stories, the most ideal tweets to, create interaction with other people and wish they, in a certain way, were in our situation right now. And I feel like for us, seeing those types of things can become quite damaging. Because in the long run, you're going to want to try to achieve the same things other people are achieving. But all of our lives, we're all on different tracks. We all have different destinations. We all have different goals. So we shouldn't try to be influenced by those things we see. And especially when it comes to, body goals and achievements related to your own appearance. Most of the times, the people you'll see on, all the Instagram influencers, all the Instagram models, all the celebrities, all the people you can imagine right now, most of the times, all the images they will post are either, face-tuned, photoshopped, or heavily filtered to make the people look significantly more attractive than they are. The sheer amount of Instagram fails you see of people trying to make themselves look better by having, end up without, armpits, without kneecaps, looking distorted, you see the tile on the background just completely warped. The sheer amount of times you see that, you don't see the amount of times it's successful. If it's well done, it's hard to spot, but we know it's there. You go on a Kylie Jenner, you go on a page, with the Kardashians, those types of peoples, the images they post are doctored. Those images don't represent what they look like in real life. People have skin texture and blemishes and stuff like that. Now, I'm not trying to bring down Kylie. I know it's very much because she's in the public eye that she has to post these types of images. But we know for a fact that these images are damaging to young girls. They create this, unattainable goal that they try to achieve, but isn't natural. For a fact that Kylie Jenner had lip injections. She's undergone surgery. So while we know all of those facts, oftentimes we can't make our brains not become envious. Even though we know those things aren't realistic, we somehow become envious. And that's one of the biggest issues when we deal with our own self-esteem and confidence that we have to tackle. We have to try to distance ourselves from this idealized version that people create on the internet of themselves. We have to be self-aware enough to know that whatever you're posting, it's not gonna be true to who you are in your daily life. And we shouldn't base our morals and values around what we see on social media. You're just gonna end up with a bunch of fucked up kids with mental illnesses. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. I genuinely have issues with myself because of the things I see on social media. I look at my body and I look at what people post on, Instagram, on Twitter, the bodies I see over there, and I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, I will never achieve that. That is unattainable. But I'm getting pretty heated. I'm just talking about social media, and that's not the goal of today's episode. I'm not here to hate on social media. I love social media. I'm not gonna act like I don't. But I just wanted to have a little rant at the beginning where I just vent a little bit about, my general distaste for how people present themselves on social media. But let's go back to what I originally wanted to talk about, which is self-esteem, confidence, and your own personal identity. Now, why don't I discuss a little bit about self-esteem and how I deal with my own self-esteem? This pandemic has really made me face my inner demons. I've had to look inside myself and, deal with the person inside of me that I don't look at often enough. I really had to, interact with my mind, really deeply go into my own head and interact with the person inside of it a lot more than I would in my day-to-day life before this entire situation. And I feel that because I've been in my own head for so long by myself, I've started developing imposter syndrome. I don't feel like I know what I should know. I feel like I have all of these qualifications that I have. I have a bachelor, I have a master's. I did well in those things. I have all this knowledge, but I don't feel like I represent that. I don't feel like I should be allowed to say that I have those qualifications. I feel like an imposter, that I'm just saying, oh no, I have these degrees, you trust me. Trust me that I do. But I feel like I don't have those skills anymore. And I feel like all of that is very much relating to the fact that because I've been dealing with trying to find employment, trying to find a doctorate, that's just been eating away at me. Being rejected, being unsuccessful have just been eating away at my mental health and made me develop this imposter syndrome. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that while I look at the situation I'm in right now, I have taken a very non-standard approach to reaching the goal that I have. Everybody that knows me knows that I used to want to go to medical school. I wanted to study medicine. And that was my dream until I was about 20 years old. So it's just been 3 years since I shifted my own narrative and I shifted my own goals from medicine to the area I'm in right now, which is pharmaceuticals. And I didn't take a standard approach for that, because all the decisions I made during school, during high school, all decisions I made at the beginning of my university time, I made all those decisions to go to medical school. I did a bachelor's in a medical science. And through that, I discovered my passion for something completely different, which was pharmacy. Now, I'm not a pharmacist. I don't have a degree in pharmacy. So I oftentimes, when I'm in the circle that I frequent, with the people that I've studied with, the people that I wish to work with, I oftentimes feel like an outsider because I don't have the same background. Even though most of the people inside the area are so multidisciplinary, so faceted in the sense where we interact with so many people from so many different areas, from so many different backgrounds, that I shouldn't be pissed at myself that I have a non-standard background. I shouldn't be angry at me, but I still am. Because I feel like I didn't make the right decisions in the past that are now leading me to go through this painful situation. Not finding employment or education as is prescribed to me. People just assume you're going to find a job after you graduate. That's what people tell us. You're going to go to university, you're going to graduate, and you're going to find a job. But that doesn't represent the reality of the situation that we're in right now. Especially with the job market as it is. All of those things are just making me spiral. I see friends of mine that studied with me, that I know, people that are close to me, and they're all finding jobs or, furthering their education. And I just feel that I'm the odd one out. That I am inadequate. I feel inadequate oftentimes. And I have to combat that in my head, because I know for a fact that I'm not inadequate. I know I'm not less than. I know all those. Those are facts that I'm very much aware of. But since I see people around me having so much more success than I do, it makes me want to spiral. It's so irritating. And just having that irritation was eating away at me. You have to imagine, you always feel like you're the only one that isn't having any success. You're the odd one out. All your friends are doing things, and you're just there, vegetating away. That isn't good for anybody. That's not a way to tackle a sane mind. You're not going to be mentally well if you're constantly having to face rejection. You feel like you're not in control of your own life. You feel like you're just in the passenger seat of your own car. You're not the driver anymore. You're just an outsider sitting next to the driver, and you're not in control. So what I had to do was take the reins back. Take control of the situation that felt like it was uncontrollable. And that is the hard part. Looking in the mirror and telling yourself, I am going to take control. Whatever it takes. I am going to be the one that decides where my life is heading, where I'm going. And that's what I had to do. So I sat my ass down and I started thinking, what can I do? How can I take back control? How can I feel like I'm the writer of my own story? So I decided, what am I in control of? What can I control in this moment that feels so uncontrollable? What are the things that I can tackle right now to gain back control of my life? And I came up with 2 ideas that felt like I could be in control of these situations, and that's going to lead me to being in the driver's seat again. The first one of which was I wanted a creative challenge. I've always wanted to do something creative with my time. I've wanted to either create videos, create content. I just wanted to put something out there to, flex my creative muscle. And that's when I decided I want to do a podcast, which is what I'm doing right now. That was the first thing that I am in genuine control of that decision. I have made that decision. I'm going to start working on it. And the second one was I'm in control of my physical body. In this instant right now, one of the few things I can genuinely take full control of is my physical body. So I decided to make the jump and start working out. It's something that I used to genuinely enjoy when I was much younger, something that gave me so much pride and pleasure. And I wanted to start it up again. I decided I have this treadmill at home. I can run at home. I can be safe. I don't have to go outside and, expose myself to this virus. I can stay home and still work out and have a healthy body. If I take control of my own body, I can control my own mental health. And that's exactly what I did. Having these two things that I'm in full control of make me feel like I was back in control of my own life. And I'm still not completely satisfied with my goals and my achievements, but I can genuinely say that I have a sense of wholeness again. I feel like I am me again. I don't have to question my own decisions anymore. And that's one of the most important things that I took away from that. By having those small things I'm in full control of, I feel like I am me again. And having spoken on these thoughts of imposter syndrome and not being in control of your own life, I feel like it's important to mention the fact that I always believed in the ideology that fake it till you make it. Fake being confident until you genuinely become confident. I was one of those guys that was always like, if I can appear confident enough to people, they'll believe I'm confident. If they believe I'm confident, I am confident. If I appear like I have everything under control, people will come to me. They'll ask me questions. And by seeing that, I believe in myself that I have the confidence in my own skills, because if people come to me asking questions, they believe that I know something that they might not know. And by answering those questions and giving advice and stuff like that, I appear confident. And if you appear confident, people will believe you are confident. And by that system, by that positive reward feedback, you genuinely become confident. That's the way that functions for a lot of people. That's the way a lot of people just exist, and they are, and that's how they build up their own self-esteem and confidence. By faking it until you make it, you're pretty much portraying confidence in your skills, your abilities, and stuff like that, and then you'll have people coming to you to ask questions, to look for advice, and that's going to reinforce your own belief in yourself. And if you believe in yourself, you become more confident. The same thing can be said about, your appearance. If you're confident in the way you look, and you dress nice, you have good hygiene, you take care of yourself, people might come to you, ask for advice, try to copy your style, those types of things, and that's once again going to reinforce those positive mindsets. That reinforcement of that, that positivity, that positive feedback loop, that's going to be the real game changer for your confidence, because that positive feedback loop is going to reinforce the idea in your head that you have the ability in those areas, so you should have confidence in those areas, and that's how you become truly confident. When I tell you a little bit about how I became the most confident I have ever been in my entire life, and that was between the ages of 15 to 17. When I was, in my late teens, I was truly confident in who I was and everything about me. Why? Why was I that confident in myself? That's actually quite simple to explain, because I had a lot of positivity around me. I had a lot of people giving me praise for who I was and what I was doing. I was the physically fittest I've ever been in my life. I was super healthy. And because I was physically fit, people interacted more often with me. Because, let's be honest, people have a bias, and fitter, more attractive people tend to get more attention from people in general. So more people were treating me kindly, and I was interacting with more people in general. And that positive feedback, I didn't have to worry about not being confident in myself, because everybody around me just radiated positivity towards me. So I didn't have to worry about my mental health. And I felt like I was doing amazing because people around me were treating me well. So I didn't have to worry about my personal confidence because I was so sure of it. Because I was faced with so many people giving me positivity back. I was faced with so many people being positive towards me that I didn't have to worry about my confidence. And I've only truly become really confident in my own body and myself and my appearance once again now, because I decided to start working out again and taking care of myself. And I want to expand on that, because I feel like it's an area we can deconstruct, because there's a lot of hurt and healing and growing that can be done by analyzing that situation. As people that know me, I've been overweight pretty much most of my life. I used food as a comfort when I was younger because I had, quite a hectic childhood. As I said, I've lived in a number of countries. I moved around a lot when I was younger. I changed a lot of my friend groups, a lot of the, environment I was in. And all of that, has an impact on a young child. It's hard, and that difficulty, those struggles, I pretty much just went into food, because food was comfort to me. A lot of people use food as a comfort. I feel like it's quite well known in the circles of psychology that a lot of people use food as a way to cope with stress and change and stuff like that. And that links into the fact that since I was always very much overweight, I, became quite familiar with the body positivity movement that, really sparked up in the last decade. And I feel like I've always been a very big proponent of the body positivity movement. And I think it's a great thing. But in my case, when I think about my own weight, I know that my weight is causing me health issues. It's impacting me negatively. I have high blood pressure because of my weight. And that pretty much is I'm actively shortening my life by continuing to be overweight. And I really genuinely embodied that mindset. I really came to that realization when I was about 15 years old, because I was faced with the reality of the situation. I had a close family friend of ours pass away at the age of 27 due to a heart attack because he was morbidly obese. And I was on that same trajectory. As a young teenager, I was heading towards early death because I was pretty much eating myself to death's door. And, that's obviously scary. It's incredibly scary, especially to a 15-year-old. So I decided I wanted to change my life. I wanted to better myself. And what I did was I started working out religiously. I went to the gym about 4 times a week. I completely revamped my eating habits and my lifestyle, and I was able to lose 40 kilograms of fat and gain 20 kilograms of muscles. I was pretty much in great physical shape at that point in my life. And most of my, the negative health impacts I had at that point were pretty much reverted. I was back to being a normal teen, a normal physically active, teen. And it felt so amazing. Everybody's pretty much aware that being fat gets you bullied in school. I feel like that's just, common knowledge. And because I stopped being fat and I started working out and becoming physically fit, I didn't have to worry about my own appearance when I went into school. I wasn't bullied by that point in my life. That was at a much younger age. At that point in my life, I feel like most people had stopped bullying anybody for those stupid types of reasons like my weight. But having that weight lifted off, literally, having that weight taken off of my back, just felt so freeing because people were treating me better than they were before. Not my close friends, I'm very thankful for that. They didn't change the way they interacted with me. But, acquaintances and people and strangers started treating me better. Because we know as a society that we have, a bias towards physically fit people. We usually treat attractive, physically fit people better than we do, overweight people. That's just a fact of life and society in general. And having all of that positive feedback, as I said before, just makes you more confident in yourself because you stop worrying about all the little things that you might have been worried about before. But my weight had always been pretty much deeply linked with my own mental health. So when stress started piling up during my last year of school and moving to university, it started destabilizing my mental health to a certain extent. And that started to, affect my body and how I treated it. And I started gaining back some of that weight. The ancient Romans, at least I think, don't quote me on that, had that phrase, mens sana in corpore sana, sano, or something like that, which means healthy mind in a healthy body. And my mind wasn't healthy anymore, to to a certain degree. My mind wasn't as healthy as it used to be, and that started impacting my body. My body wasn't as healthy as it had been until that point. So gaining back that weight just put it, into that, spiral again, where I'm not well mentally, which affects my body. And then because my body isn't great, it affects my mind. And then you're just back into that, you're back into that circle. You're going in circles and circles and circles. And that's just, you're digging yourself deeper and deeper into a problem. I lost out on all that positive reinforcement I had because I was physically fit again. And that just really messed with my head for the last couple of years. And that genuinely really messed with my head. And then COVID came around and it scared the bejesus out of me. I, a 23-year-old, was in a high-risk category because I'm overweight and hypertensive. And I needed to change that about myself because I wasn't willingly gonna increase my risk of dying. Or at least I wasn't willing to actively increase my chance of dying this early. And I started not having that stimulus in my mind that I need to lose weight for society, in a sense. I need to lose weight to fit into society's mold of what I should look like, what I should be like, and, all of those types of things. I wanted to change myself for me, not for other people, not for society, not for all of that. I had internalized that desire to follow society's image of what I should look like as a man. Like I mentioned in my previous episode on toxic masculinity, I had this, idealized version of myself that fit in and, achieved a certain ideal body goal for myself. And, that society told me that I should have that body. I had that very much internalized within myself. And I felt like I was trying to be thin and fit for people to accept me because they wouldn't accept me if I was fat. So they would treat me as a human with dignity. And I felt like I didn't have that in my own body anymore because I didn't fit into that idea of a thin, attractive person. But I needed change for myself, for my health, both physical and mental. And society wasn't going to thank me, the individual, for fitting into that mold that it created. Nobody was going to be thankful for me fitting into an idea of society, as it's a thankless job, and I didn't want to take that job anymore. I wanted to be good for myself. I wanted to be healthy for me, so that I could achieve what I wanted, so that I didn't have to worry about dying at the age of 27, so that I didn't have to worry about all of those horrible things that I had to worry about before. So I decided I was going to change for me, and that's exactly what I did. Starting on the 6th of November 2020, I worked out, and I've now, after it's been 6 months, can proudly say that I'm back down 20 kilograms. I have lost 20 kilograms again, and I'm not at the goal I want to be just yet. I still have quite a long way to go, but I can stand proudly in front of myself in the mirror and say that I'm improving myself for me. I'm not improving myself for anybody else. I'm not improving myself for a loved one. I'm not improving myself for society. I'm not improving myself for social media. I'm improving myself because I want to be the best version of myself so I can love myself. And when I talk about loving myself, I just harp back onto body positivity because it's something I hold very dear in my heart. It's something that means a lot to me because I know there are things about my body that I'll never be able to change. There are things that I've just fallen in love with because they represent me as the person. They're part of Luca, the individual. All of it means a lot to me. I look at my body and I see these stretch marks on it. And those stretch marks are never going to leave my body. They're part of me now. But when I look at them, I don't see something negative. I don't see something that disappoints me. I look at my stretch marks and I see a part of Luca, the whole, the individual, the person. I see my hard work. I see how much energy I had to put in to become who I wanted to be. And they symbolize so much to me that I've grown to love them so much. So what do I want you to take away from that? I want you to know that real genuine change should always start from within. You shouldn't be wanting to change just because society tells you to change. You should change to better yourself on your own terms. Because society is always going to have an unrealistic expectation of you. And you don't have to unnecessarily meet that expectation if it's just going to cause you harm. You should change to better yourself because you desire to be a better version of yourself. Oh, and also, I recently found out that you're less likely to be hired if you're fat because apparently companies don't trust you enough to send you on like business trips because they think, the health insurance costs might be too high and stuff like that. So, that just lit a fire under my ass. No, but seriously, jokes aside, the first step to self-improvement are introspection and acceptance. You have to look inside yourself and find the desire to change. But you also have to accept yourself for who you are. Having that self-acceptance will facilitate the process because you can be honest with yourself if you accept all parts of you. You're also going to be more likely to take help from outsiders, receiving the help you require, and identifying the people that can give you the help you need. That is so essential when you're trying to improve yourself. And since we're now talking about improving yourself, I want to go back to confidence. Acting confident doesn't always mean you're going to become confident. I said fake it till you make it. But oftentimes, just acting like you're confident in yourself doesn't always translate to genuinely becoming confident in yourself. And I've personally experienced that quite a bit. I made a ridiculous number of self-deprecating jokes about myself in the past, and I still occasionally do. Like you've heard on this podcast, I make a lot of jokes about my unemployment at the moment. I make fun of myself for being unemployed. And I make these unemployment jokes not because it's fun to be unemployed, it's pretty shitty, but it adds humor to a dark conversation. I don't want to make the conversation all about how, I'm feeling at this point in my life, that I'm in a dark place, and, I don't want it to be all gloomy and sad and depressing. I want this to be a fun experience where, I can make a couple of wisecracks about unemployment and we can just move along and not harp on the conversation too much because it is a painful conversation. And while yes, I'm aware of the fact that a lot of other people are in the same situation as I am, and there are a lot of people that are in significantly worse situations, where they have to worry about homelessness, where they have to worry about when's the next paycheck coming in so I can keep a roof over my head or my children fed. I can still be allowed to be sad about my own situation and sad about the fact that I'm in this dark place because these aren't the shitty situation Olympics. We aren't competing about who's in the worst situation. And yes, I'm fully aware of the fact that being self-deprecating is unhealthy in general. It can be damaging to your mental health. But self-deprecating humor can also be used as tension relief. And it's a way for you to be aware of your imperfection and faults, but not take them too seriously. You're giving levity to a situation that's pretty shitty in general. And by being and making those jokes, by being humorous about it, you're less likely to fall into that deep, dark hole of no return where you're just so hyper-focused on the shitty situation that you can't think of anything else. And I know this type of humor is extremely popular with our generation. You see it all the time on Twitter. You see all these comedians. You see John Mulaney, Pete Davidson. These guys have become famous because they keep making jokes about themselves in a very self-deprecating way. And in my personal experience, I use a lot of my self-deprecating humor as a defense mechanism. It's a way for me to beat other people and everybody else to a punchline about stuff that I don't like about myself, those qualities that I'm not super happy about. But I've noticed that by being self-deprecating, by making these types of jokes, you shift your internal voice into a more negative tone where you're constantly, having those thoughts like, why can't I be like so-and-so? Why don't I look as good as so-and-so? It negatively affects your mind, the voice inside your head talking to you, your conscience. And that negative shift, it makes it so much harder to go back into a positive mindset. Trying to shift that narrative inside your own head is so hard. You have to start deconstructing things around it. You're not just gonna instantly, from one day to the next, stop having these intrusive negative thoughts. You have to train your inner voice to talk more positively about yourself. Because by doing that, by being more positive inside your own head, that's going to spill over to other areas of your life, and it's going to make you more optimistic about people in general and the outlook you have on life and situations. So that's why I made the decision that I'm going to significantly reduce the amount of times I make self-deprecating jokes about myself. But it's not something I want to totally give up on, because I still quite enjoy the tension relief those types of jokes make, and they can oftentimes, make you more relatable to other people, facilitating starting off conversations and stuff like that. So yes, I want to, shift my internal voice, be more positive about myself in my own head, so I don't feel as negatively about my own self-esteem and my own characteristics. It's a way for me to tackle the imposter syndrome that I talked about at the beginning of this episode. With this imposter syndrome that I've been feeling lately, it's very much reflective of the fact that I've always had doubts about my own skills to a certain extent. I've never known exactly the origins of these doubts about myself. I believe some of them originate from my perception that I could always try harder and do better at things if I invested myself just that little bit more, and I always feel like I'm not giving my 100% in situations, and I feel like some of that doubt may lead back to that. But I also feel like it might be related to teachers I had in, my childhood, because I remember I had teachers that really didn't believe in me and, ridiculed me to a certain extent, which reminds me very much of a teacher I had in primary school who had this irrational dislike of me as a person. And I feel like it's very much related to the fact that I knew this woman was xenophobic, because I was a Brazilian, I was an outsider at a German school, and this woman was very much, stuck in her ways of the past and not very culturally open, which I always found to be very perplexing. And I've had other teachers that, didn't give me their vote of confidence, and I feel like because I had a lot of self-doubt in those situations, and that was just reinforced by people telling me that I should doubt myself to a certain extent, that just, perpetuated and continued on throughout my later life and has come back to haunt me to a certain extent, with the pairing with that, always that desire to give more of myself and always having that perception that I could work a little harder and do a little more work to just, edge myself forward. And I feel like all of that has an influence on how I feel about myself, and it led to this development of an imposter syndrome. Because I know childhood trauma and stuff like that does tend to present itself much later in life, and I've only really started developing this real sense of imposter syndrome in the last year. And I felt like it was just a rehash of a mindset that I had before I started my master's. Because when I started my master's, I was in a completely different mindset than I am right now. Because I walked into my master's with the full intention to give my 110% to the best I possibly could. Because I wanted it to really reflect the skills I possess, because I felt like that would be, the point in my life that I have to really genuinely take control of how people will see me based on what I study, what my educational background is. And it also had to do with the fact that I was from a different background than the area I studied in. And I felt like I was somehow infringing outside of my own element. So it just gave me that higher drive to really work so much more than I ever had before. And I started really genuinely feeling very good about myself, because I felt like I was giving the most I could, and I was being rewarded for it because I was doing so well, getting all the grades that I always wanted to get. And that's not something I had felt in a very, very, very long time, because I had lost a lot of my confidence, a lot of my self-esteem. And it was such a cathartic feeling, having that control, having all those good feelings. And then when everything stopped with the pandemic, I just felt like I was back at square one, where I didn't have the ability to exert myself as much, and I just felt so stuck in a rut that it just started to really start chipping away back at my mind. And that's when I feel like the imposter syndrome started coming back. It was the first time in the last year that I really started to really feel that way. And these feelings of inadequacy, those imposter-like syndrome feelings, they're very reminiscent of what I used to feel like when I was writing university application letters, stuff like that, where you have to you have to sell yourself. You have to bring up all your, strengths and identify shortcomings and talk about those types of things and demonstrate that motivation. And I feel like that's very much reminiscent of what I'm doing right now, where if we're writing cover letters and PhD applications, stuff like that. And because I remind myself of the past where I had a lot of difficulty writing those essays, because the school system I was in never really encouraged that boastfulness, in a sense, where you talk about yourself with this grandeur behind you. And I still somewhat struggle with the overall ideas of selling myself as much as I should be, because I know I have good characteristics about myself, and I'm a good writer in general, but writing in a way that makes you convincing to a recruiter, to a hiring manager, is so much harder when you're constantly getting rejection after rejection after rejection. It becomes so monotonous that it just becomes expected. It just becomes expected that you'll end up being rejected. So you lose that energy to write a convincing essay, to write a convincing letter to a person, because you're so stuck in the mindset. You're so stuck in the mindset that you will be rejected. And that's such a hard rut to get out of, because I see close friends that recently graduated and have found employment, and I feel like I'm not fitting into that group anymore, even though I am aware that this pandemic is messing up the job market. And I shouldn't be as surprised as I am that it's so much harder to find employment at the moment. So now that I've talked at length about, feeling inadequate, doing those types of things, not fitting in, why don't I talk to you about, combating those feelings? What did I do to stop feeling like this? How do I on a daily basis try to improve myself, improve my feelings, so that I don't get stuck? The first thing I did was I just had to come to terms with the fact that because I can't find a job right now doesn't mean that I'm a failure or inadequate. And that's a hard realization that you have to come to, because it consists of reaching the realization that my employment status does not define me. Just because I'm unemployed doesn't mean that I am worse off, doesn't mean that I'm not a member of society, it doesn't mean that I am less than. It's simply related to the fact that society's dictating that I need to get a job as soon as possible. And you play into those societal values. Obviously, we all want to be accepted by people around us. That's normal. You have to come to the realization that you alone have the power to define who you are and what your value is. You have to also realize that rejections shouldn't be taken to heart. That's just setting yourself up for failure. Yes, it will hurt. You will be pissed. You'll probably curse out the hiring manager. You probably want to fucking punch him in the face. But you have to persevere, because there are plenty of jobs out there. And plenty of them will look like your dream job. But it won't work out. And that's perfectly fine. And I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't crushed when I got a couple of those rejections. Getting that email that says, I didn't get the position and we can't give you any feedback because there's so many qualified applicants. You look at that and you get pissed. You do. It's a natural reaction, because you can't see why they won't hire you, because they won't tell you. It's always about steep competition, so many qualified people, but somebody made that decision. Somebody said, yeah, no, you don't fit here. So I just would like to know why. And even though you'll have that desire to know why, and you'll have that, anger within yourself, you can't let that taint your mindset. Yes, it will occur. It will occur most likely a couple more times. It can occur 100 more times. But you have to persevere through that. Because rejection in and of itself isn't the end all be all. It doesn't mean that you don't have value. It simply means that for that moment and that time, that wasn't meant to be where you're supposed to be. You have to figure out that that opportunity wasn't meant for you in that moment. And this isn't some type of, grand scheme type of situation. We obviously know that, oh yeah, no, somebody has a plan for me. That doesn't, if you want to believe that, that is perfectly fine. If you hold those beliefs in your heart, they're more likely to help you. That you believe that there is some grander scheme that's gonna, help you find where you're supposed to be at the end. But oftentimes, what you should be doing is not looking outside, but looking within, and identifying what is making you angry at that moment. And if it's just a rejection in and of itself, that's fine. But you have to work that rejection constructively. You might think of the situation like, oh, okay, I might not have the specific criteria for this company. Look at their listing, look at what they want to identify, and maybe try to pinpoint exactly, what could I have done a little differently? And try to apply that every single time you make a new application. You have to keep evolving with the situation. That evolution is going to improve your probability of both becoming more zen within, but also improve your chances of being higher later on. And I hate to have to invoke this hustler mentality. I'm not a big fan of the hustler mentality. But I feel like with this situation, to quote their words, you just gotta keep hustling. You just gotta keep putting yourself out there and try to reach out to connections. Don't feel ashamed of asking people for help. Put yourself out there and keep trying. Talk to people you know, network with people. Try to put your CV out there, talk to a lot of people, be as daring as to contact people in the industry and ask them if they have some time to talk to you about these types of things. That's what's most important. Trying to network yourself, trying to, level out the playing field, because you'll most likely always feel like the playing field is rigged against you. But you can't let the game play you. You have to play the game. And a part of playing the game is taking rejection constructively and trying to get your mind off of the negative and gaining new skills throughout the process. And I'll tell you about a couple of things I do to keep myself from falling into that slump of only expecting rejections and only taking all of that negatively. So what I've started doing more often than not is I've been reading a lot more. Now, a lot of people will tell you, oh, go read, reading is great and all of that, and it is, genuinely, reading is amazing for you. It'll improve your writing, it stimulates your brain, your analytical thinking, your pattern detection, your problem solving. It's also great for assimilating new knowledge, because reading within your area, and also reading in general, it's such a stimulating task. It's like working out for your brain. And we love working out in this household. And one of the main positives of reading in general for the process of application and job hunting is that reading can make you better in conversations. It improves your skills in conversational settings. It can also increase your perspective, widening your cultural knowledge. You can also widen your knowledge within the area of interest you have. You can pick up, textbooks, important legislative books, anything within your area, and try to, build upon your knowledge, but also create new knowledge that you have from areas outside your own expertise. Because books are a great way to gather new skills. By reading books, you're not only improving yourself, improving your mind, improving your knowledge, it's also a way to stay connected with what's happening in the world, with cultures. You widen your own horizon. And by widening your horizon, you're improving your own likability, your own employability, because you seem more cultured. People tend to want people that are cultured, have greater perspective, can see multiple different opinions and sides, and all of that. And also, book reading is such a great way to reduce stress. You take your mind off of what's going on in the world, and you focus on that singular task. that can bring so much enjoyment to people. If it's just, a book you're reading for fun, it's a fantasy, sci-fi, something like that, and you're just winding down at the end of the day. Books are such an amazing way to just de-stress, but they can also be such a powerful tool to expand your arsenal. That's why I always recommend read more books, because you're just improving yourself in so many different ways. Another thing I find very important when you're on your downtime, when you're not doing much outside of just, applications, that type of stuff, is what I found to be very helpful but also interesting is trying to learn a new language. Our world is becoming ever more connected. And having the ability to speak in more than one language, being bilingual, trilingual, quadrilingual, speaking those multiple languages can facilitate it to navigate our multicultural world. Speaking more than one language opens up so many doors for you. Because you're not only, stimulating your mind, you're not only learning a new skill, but you're also learning about a new culture, a new worldview, you're learning more history. There's so many powerful things you do when you learn a new language, because you become immersed in another country, you become immersed in another culture, especially if it's a language that's spoken throughout multiple countries around the world. It has such a power for you because you're not only stimulating your brain, but you're also improving technical skills and professional skills, because the more languages you speak, that's just going to increase your probability of getting a job at a multinational or a higher position, because you prove that you have these skills to interact with other people, and you have these skills that make you so much more personable, because people will feel more comfortable around you if you speak their language. Because languages are the thing that connects us. Languages connect us to other people that we don't know. Language connects us to culture, to country, to society, to so many different things. And I always felt like languages are a way to immerse yourself in another culture. That's what I like to do. And that's what I've taken up Spanish during the pandemic. I've been teaching myself more Spanish because that's a language I've always wanted to learn. It's a language that's spoken in so many countries, so many, regions, and it allows you to communicate with so many more people. And I feel like that's such a great thing about it, because I love the multiculturalism of the world. I grew up around so many nationalities, so many people, so many different cultures, that I'm so enamored with being in those situations, with being in that circle. And I feel like learning a new language is such a great thing to do when you have some downtime. Additionally, talking about language is another thing that's very good and very considerable, is take some online classes on a subject of interest. It doesn't have to be directly in your area, your expertise. Take some classes online for things that you just enjoy, because it's a way for you to build up your hobbies, but also get a couple more skills, because you never know what requirements you could find a new passion in life. Take a couple of courses online, see a couple of things, look at things that you might find interesting that could improve your mindset and the things you do. Skills that I always recommend for you to try out, stuff like programming, photo editing, video making, videography, screenwriting, whatever floats your boat. Those things can always improve your chances of being hired, but you're also developing a new hobby, a new interest, and you're taking your mind off those stressors you have in daily life. Because learning a skill is always very challenging in a sense, but it's also very rewarding. Learning something new always has a certain level of reward, because having more skills can not only boost what you feel about yourself, but also how people see you. And that just leads back to confidence. Some people are just naturally confident. They don't need any additional help, but it's always possible to build up and improve your confidence. It's not an impossible skill that only a select few can master or possess, but it's much more a skill that can be honed and polished. And everybody can take a blow to their confidence. It's natural. Sometimes it just occurs. But it's most important for you to know that there's always a way you can get back up. And there's always a way in which you can improve your own confidence. It's never, a one-way street. And it's never a dead end. There's always a way you can improve and change and, reach greater heights. Now I've talked about, self-confidence and self-esteem at length at this point, but I also find it important to talk about the concept that shapes and influences both areas of the self, which is personal identity. Now you might ask yourself, what is personal identity? And I could give you the explanation a philosopher might give you, but that would most likely take hours and discuss very metaphysical and philosophical concepts that are very hard to get into. So I'm just going to include a link to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy discussing the topic at length and talking about all those philosophical questions, down in the description. But I'll give you a simpler and more easily digestible definition of personal identity. Personal identity refers to the properties we attribute to ourselves that build our understanding of ourselves. It includes things that differentiate us from others and make us unique. As you most likely know, if you've ever had an identity crisis, identity is a complex concept. It's a real tough nut to crack. And navigating the world is already so complex that often we overlook ourselves and become very disconnected with who we are. And I faced my own identity crises throughout my life because of how complex it is sometimes for us to understand ourselves. And I'll elaborate on what I mean by that. I'll start off with a concept that I feel like is very easy for people to grasp, and that's nationality and ethnicity, two concepts that I feel are very unique to every person but also hold a significance to them. So, for all of you, I am Brazilian. That's my nationality. And that would usually imply, obviously, that I am Latino, as Brazil is very much a part of Latin America. But as anybody that's ever seen me before will most likely tell you, I am very much white. Which isn't uncommon in Brazil because, a large portion of the Brazilian population has ancestors that came in from Europe, that immigrated to Brazil back in the 19th century. Yet I don't have any family that actively lives in Europe, except for my parents, and they're only here for their job. And they'll return back to Brazil. They're only here for a limited amount of time. They never plan on staying here indefinitely. So nobody calls this continent home, so to speak. But I'm very much an outlier in that situation where I was raised outside of Brazil for 20 of the 23 years I've been alive on this earth. And I've returned every single year to Brazil, at least once, because, as I've mentioned, all my family lives there. But even so, it's never truly felt like home. I very much have that crisis where, because I've moved around so often in my entire life, I've become very detached from just identifying one place as my home. I oftentimes just say that I have a home in so many different places that I just don't feel comfortable saying that that one place is just my genuine home. And I feel like that's a very much an omnipresent story for a lot of, young immigrants that grew up outside of their home country, so to speak. Very much when I return back to Brazil, I'm very much seen as a European in the family, because I've spent so much time outside of Brazil that I've, changed and adapted to certain mannerisms and social norms that are, common in Europe and Asia and all the places I've lived in before. And that just starts this conflict of identity in which I am, a Brazilian, but I also have Portuguese and Italian heritage. And those are the countries that allow me, and those citizenships are what allow me to live in Europe because I am a European citizen because of my ancestry. But I've never lived in Portugal, and I've never had that connection to the country. Much like Italy, I've never had the connection to that country because nobody in my living family has ever lived in those countries. And I feel like that's a very commonly reciprocated feeling in a lot of young immigrants. I know for a fact a lot of Mexican American young people have those feelings, and children of immigrant in general that are born outside of their home in quotation mark, countries, or move at a very young age. They have that crisis where they don't exactly know what they are or what they identify as. And I feel like also in my case, I've been educated in the German but also international school system, which to a certain extent has alienated a lot of my family towards achievement and milestones in my educational journey. And for that, I have to thank my parents on a side note a lot because they really engaged with my education at all times. And they were always very much aware of the situation I was in, the milestones I was reaching, and my, the end goals, and encouraging me to achieve and supporting me. But, family back home had, a hard time wrapping their heads around the milestones, the achievements, the goals, stuff like that. And I feel like that to a certain extent always alienates you at a very young age because education is such a, major part of our identity when we're young because we're all going to school at that point in our life. And I feel like I've never truly represented any specific country wholeheartedly because I feel like I'm a mixture of all the circumstances and occurrences and places that I've lived in my life. With age, my peers and family have told me I'm becoming more Brazilian in their eyes as I started embodying certain characteristics and, that identify Brazilian people, be it the laid backness, chill that they attribute to Brazilians in general. But I feel like more often than not, I'm very much an amalgamation of all the nations I've lived in, but also the countries I descend from. And with time in general, you will change. People change with time. And often I look back at things I wrote and said in the past, and I just can't see that person as the me today. I've become a different person through the environment I've lived in. The people around us shape us, and the environment we exist in molds us to a certain extent. And I feel this is especially true with regards to when I look at my queerness. I've felt scared of coming out as bi for the longest time. And until I moved to a different country, a different city where nobody knew me, that's when I decided that I wouldn't let other people's opinion dictate my own self-value. I won't let other people's opinion dictate my own value. I wouldn't let it affect my happiness. But you can tell from the fact that I only did it when I left, it still scared me to be true with people that I knew. But because I took that step and I became open about who I am, I became so much happier, so much of a happier person in general because of it. And yes, I still keep characteristics of my previous identity when I interact with people that I knew from way back when. And I still keep some of the characteristics with people that I might not be as close to or haven't known me as long, because I feel those characteristics are very safe. There are things that I know that won't drive people to feel weird about me. So I keep a couple of those characteristics, but they don't embody who I truly am. Well, actually, they might embody to a certain extent who I am because I keep these characteristics for so long that they integrate in certain aspects of me. But I feel like when you look at identity in general, you can decide what parts are truly part of your identity and what parts people would ascribe to your identity that don't meet your inner desire to identify with those things. Especially those characteristics I speak of that I only apply to people I've known for a very long time that, haven't been part of my life as much as they used to in the past. And it reflects, my fear of rejection, that I only came out to my parents at the age of 21. It's been a little over 2 years. And, at no point in my life did my parents ever show me any reason to be fearful or be scared that they would change if I ever did decide to come out to them. I became a very, strong ally for the LGBTQ plus community when I was quite young in my early to late teens. And at multiple points they were like, if you ever feel like you want to come out, or if you don't feel comfortable with the identity you have at the moment, you're always welcome to come to us and speak to us about it, and we'll love you no matter what. Even if you're gay, bi, straight, whatever. And, that's exactly what occurred when I came out. they continued loving me. Nothing changed except the fact that I feel like I can be a more authentic version of myself in front of them. And I feel like that's a very similar, journey of self-discovery for a lot of other queer people. I started by considering myself an ally to the LGBTQ plus community in my late teens, and I started sharing information and defending and advocating for the community. And I started feeling a deep solidarity with the LGBTQ plus community because I just saw myself as an invested outsider that wanted improvements for a group that had been persecuted for so long. But then I started to identify with a lot of things I saw and read. And then the realization in my head started to come in, I wasn't just that invested outsider that was seeing people being oppressed for who they are and who they loved. But that took me 4 years to really reach and understand that conclusion. It's still a rocky journey that, I realized that I wasn't just the invested outsider, but I was very much a part of the community. And it required a lot of self-discovery and experimentation with different labels, seeing which labels would be helpful and I identified with. But I also feel like they're very restricting. So I simply identified with the label that I felt most comfortable with, which was bi. And the road to discovery isn't exclusive to queerness, but also many other roads of self-discovery. Anybody can struggle to find out how they fit in or where they fit in. And it's a long road to discovery with many speed bumps and obstructions, but every step you take can lead you closer to finding your true self. So I suggest to everyone, take some time, reflect on where you are in your life and where it has led you. What kind of person were you at the start of that journey? And how much have you grown and how much have you changed? And where are you now on this road of self-discovery? And it's perfectly fine if you don't know. Not knowing is also normal. Often we're oblivious to changes that we are undergoing. Embracing change and growing can be incredibly scary. You never know what's on the other side of the door. But don't live in fear of the unknown, because you can only move forward by jumping in head first and deciding that now is the right time to start changing, to start improving yourself. And growth will come. Be open to outside influences. Be open to learning from other people. But first and foremost, decide how you want to take in that information. Don't take everything people tell you as gospel, because you have to decide on the inside if what they're telling you resounds with what you want to achieve. Others' opinions might oftentimes feel like the right thing to do, but they can also be wrong for you. So while staying open to the outside influences, you shouldn't be absorbing everything. Absorb the things you find the most helpful to you. Because as I've said, this is a personal journey to self-discovery, and nobody can dictate how you discover yourself and how you grow for yourself. But, as I often mention, be open to new ideas. Be open to learning from people that have undergone similar journeys, but decide what you want to incorporate in your own journey, because only you can make those decisions. And with that, we've concluded today's episode of the podcast. Unexpectedly, it turned out quite long. I thank you if you sat through the entire thing. I know it was extremely long, but thank you all for tuning in. Peace out.